Alright, so now we're going to see chapter 5. Chapter 5 is about function. And what is a function? A function is a small block of code that perform a specific task. And why we need functions? We need functions for four main benefits. The first one is to break problem into smaller and easier tasks, and then we reuse the code instead of repeating it. So that's the main benefit that we have in function, that we reuse code. It provides reusability. And the third one is it's improve readability and structure of your program. And finally, debugging becomes easier in functions. So these are the four benefits we have in functions. And let me give you an example that this is the program that we have, and this program is without function, that is boring and repetitive. So this is the main benefit in function that we have, is that it provides reusability, and making changes in function is much easier compared to manually edit your whole program. So that's the main benefit that we have. So let's say we have this very small program, and we have how many statements we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 statements. And these 4 statements, and using repetitive tasks, that is saying welcome Alice, welcome Bob, welcome Charlie, and welcome Diana. And these 4 statements will be on the screen with all these messages on a single line. So how can we convert this program into a function? That we create a very small function that takes one parameter, that is the name of the user or the student, and then it prints the same message, and we call this function as many times as we need. So that provides reusability. Let me give you an example, then you get understanding what I'm saying. So we have 4 statements, and instead of having these 4 statements, we created a very small function that is void greeting. So we'll discuss in a few minutes what is void, and greet is the name of the function, and it takes one parameter, that is string name. Okay, so we forward the name to these functions, and it print out the same thing that we have here, that we have welcome Alice, welcome Bob, welcome Charlie, and welcome Diana. So instead of sending this welcome, so we hard code in the functions, and we forward just names there. So it's the first thing that we have is that it provides reusability. We can use this function as many times as we want, and it also make it easier for to do changes. Let's say if we change here inside the function, it will be applied to almost all the calls that we have for this function. So we call this function here, it will be applied to here, it will also be applied to here, and also be applied to here. Let me give you an example that you can more understanding of reusability. So now we going to create a new workspace. So that, let me clear one thing again, so that you can create folders inside your workspace, and you can also create files inside your workspace. So I'm going to create a new folder here. That folder is that we have now chapter 5. All right, and inside chapter 5 I'm going to create a new file. So that's the workspace, and inside workspace we have a new folders, and inside this folder I'm going to create a new file, that is my first func.cpp. Now you're familiar that it's an extension we use for C++ file. So we going to include the header section, include input and output stream, and we also going to include the namespace std inside the header section, and int main. And by the way, this int main is also a function, and its data type is integer, and that's why we have here return 0. So we will discuss return 0 in a few minutes, but that is also a function that we have. So now we talking about user defined function. So at this point we have a user defined function that is void. If you use void, then it will not return anything. So we use void, and if the function returns int, then the data type will be int. If it returns float, it will be float. If it returns string, it will be string. So at this point the function will not return anything. The result back to us. So that's why we use void, because it's just doing printing. So we have void, and let's say it's greet. That's the name of the message. We discuss in a few minutes the whole this syntax, but let's talk about its benefit first. I'm just giving a motivation at this point, that is that it will take just one parameter. We also discuss what are parameters and what are arguments in a few minutes, but let's say we have a string, and that is a message, and we have cout welcome, and then we can get instead of message we have, let's say, the name that we forward to this method, and that is name, and then we break the line. Alright, so now I'm going to call this method inside my main area. So one thing I did is that I define one functionality outside my main area, right? Outside main area. So that function will perform one functionality that will just to print something that will be welcome, and we forward one argument. And another thing, it provides reusability. I will show you a reusability in a few minutes. And also, and making changes to function is much easier to do changes manually. Let's say we need to print name of 100 students, then we need to change, let's say, instead of saying welcome, we need to say good morning, then we need to change those 100 lines. So now let's say we have the first student name is Alice, and we call the function. Now it will print welcome Alice. All right, let me show you. See, welcome Alice. Now you see we have welcome Alice here, and there is no space here. You see, welcome and Alice both are merged together. Let's call one more time, and we forward two more names. Let's say David and one more Diana, and you will see. Let me close this terminal first and run it again, and you see we have welcome Alice, welcome David. Now I just need to put one space here. Okay, so I will make changes just to this function here, and it will be applied to all my calls that we have on line 9, 10 and 11. And let's say if I call the function more than 50 times, it will be performed to the same, it will be performed to all these calls. All right, now you will see there will be a space between the name welcome Alice, and now if let's say I have one more student, and student name is Jason, and now instead of saying welcome, I say good morning, it will apply all these changes. You see, good morning Alice, good day. So making changes in function is much easier compared to doing manually. So in manually, if I do not have this function, I have to copy this line how many times, 1 2 3 4, and let's say we have 5 students, and here I have, let's assume the first one Alice, and then the second was David, right? And now instead of saying good morning, if I have to say welcome, then I have to rewrite here, and then I also have to edit here, and also these 5 calls. So that's the reusability we have right at this point. Now let's look at the syntax. So at this point I'm just give you some motivation of reusability, and also making change inside function is much easier, and functions are used to perform specific tasks. Now let's look at a few more examples. So these are few examples that we have. Now we have a function that will add two numbers, so we forward the first number and the second number, and now this function will return something. We'll see in a return in a few minutes, and then this function is doing some specific task, that is to add, and then this function is to subtract, and this function is to multiply, and this function is to divide. And then we need that function to perform that functionality. We simply call that function inside the main body. You can also call inside the main body, or you can also call the same function inside another file. So that's the reusability. Instead of writing the same code inside another file, you simply call that function that is already defined. So this is the definition that we have here. All right, now so these are user defined functions that we have. Now let's look at the syntax, how we can have our own function exactly the same way. These are user defined function that we define. How can, now let's try to understand their syntax. The first thing that you need to provide is the data type, right? So at this point the data type is void. So I will discuss void in a few minutes. That void is used here. Void returns nothing. So if you are just doing printing, then the data type will be void. And then the name of the method. So method or function both change interchangeably. So you can use method or function. So both will be same. So name of the function is that's whatever the name you have, and it follows the same rules that we have defining a variable. So if function name is 2 words, then you can use underscore. Okay, you cannot put a space, then that will be a problem. The compiler will not understand that the function name. So you need to follow the same rules that we have for the variables. And then the list of parameters, so that could be n number of parameters we can pass to the function, and then opening curly bracket and closing curly bracket. Inside we have n number of statements here. All right, so that's the syntax of a function. All right, now let's start with very basic. So that this function, so now let's start with the very basic, that this function will just add one space, that means to break the line. So this function will not, is not taking any parameters, right? And this function just break the line and break the line or new line. So let's have a function name that is, so this function is not returning anything. We will see return in a few minutes, then you get also understanding of what is return. And because at this point it's not giving any result back to us, let's say this function just print new line, break the line, and that is new line, right? And that new line is the name of the function without any parameters, and inside we now know how to break the line, that is end l. All right, and l. All right, so we already have this function that we used before, that is to print name of students with one greeting message. I can uncomment this one. Now we have two functions here. One function is to break the line, and the second function is to greet students. So let's say we call this function here, right? And now you will see there will be a space between Alice and David. You see this, now we have a space. You must be thinking it's just this function is just printing one, it's just printing one space and also breaking the line. Why not I simply add end l here, right? But let's assume the first thing is that we separate this functionality from our main program. That the new line will be a method that we call. Another thing is, let's say I need two spaces, then I simply use to end l, right? And you will see now there will be two spaces here. You again will be thinking, why not just these two spaces I put inside here? Okay, so what about now if I put a loop there for int I is equal to 1, I less than equal to 5, okay, and then I plus plus, and I move this functionality just a 1 from here. So now we have 5 end l's, right? Because this will run 5 times. You will see that functionality will be applied here. Okay, you see now we got 5 spaces. And now if I just copy from here to here, that functionality will be applied also here. Okay, you will see now there will be a space between David and Diana. You see David and Diana, and instead of having 5 spaces, let's say I put 10 spaces here. Okay, 10 spaces, new lines. So these, the same thing I'm trying to convey this concept is that you see now we got 10 spaces here. So functions provide reusability. Now I believe that you got some understanding of what kind of reusability. So we just now calling functions, and if I just need to make some changes, I simply go here. You see I just change from 5 to 10, and let's say if I change from 15, it will be applied to all its calls. So we call this function here, it will be applied here. If we call function here, it will be applied here too. All right, and let's say if I need to call it again here, it will be applied here, right? So it's providing reusability, and making changes to function is very easy. All right, so this function is named new line. It contains only a single statement which outputs a new line character. Okay, that's the new line character or a space that we have, and that is using end l, right? The first word of the header is the return type. So that's the return type we have. Void returns nothing, int returns int, double returns double, string returns string. So we've seen what is other data types in a few minutes. All right, so how to call a function? So that's the function that we have, greet, and you simply need to call using its name. So we have greet, opening parenthesis, and at the end there will be a semicolon. That's meant that we call this function inside the main area or whatever the file you have. The call will end with semicolon, so that's the call, right? So there are different types of functions we have. So we have 4 types of functions, that no argument and no return. So this function is without return, void, without any argument. So we pass, we do not have any argument for this function. Okay, then with argument, no return. So that's the argument that we pass to the function. Let's say we adding 2 numbers, and there's the first number, second number. So these are the argument this function take, and that's without argument. So with argument and no return type, because we again use void. And then no argument with return. Okay, so that's without any argument inside that we pass to the function, and with return, that's now it's integer. And then the final type is with argument with return. So this is int data type, name of the function, and with arguments that we pass to the function. So there are 4 types of function. We see these examples in a few minutes. Now let's discuss what is argument and parameters, because these sometimes create confusion, and that is what is an argument and what is a parameter. So argument is referred to the values that are passed within a function. So when we call the function, so this function is void greet, and it takes one argument. One argument means that we pass this value to the function. That is an argument, and that is called argument within a function when the function is called. Okay, when function is called, we pass as an argument to the function, and the parameter is referred to as the variable that is defined during the function declaration or definition. Okay, so that's variable that we have here. When we define that function or declare that function, that variable is called parameter. So that parameter receive arguments. All right, so that parameter will receive arguments when we call the function. Now let me give you one more example, that these are also in order, right? So let's say we have a function that again without any return. So this function is it's void, without any return type, and the name of the function, and then it takes 2 arguments inside this function. These are called parameters. So these are the parameters we have, and we pass these arguments. The first will be received by n1, the second will be received by n2. So they will also be in order. Okay, these are parameters while declaring and defining, and these are the argument that we pass when we call the function. All right, now let's talk about return type, and also defining another function in that adds to number. All right, and we also get understanding of arguments, parameters, and return type. All right, so now let me comment this code, and we going to add another function that is now int data type. It will return int. Okay, and that is add numbers, or you can say add 2 numbers. Okay, the first number will be int first number, and the second will also be int second number. Let's assume that we adding 2 integer numbers, but if let's say these are float, then the data types will be float here. And then we're going to have, let me remove this line of code so you get understanding what we're doing. So we now going to declare one more variable, that is int result, and that will be equal to first number plus second number, right? And then we use cout. Let's use cout, and we see errors in a few minutes, and then we have to solve those errors, and you get understanding what is return and why we use int data type. So we use cout result, right? So that's the function that we define that will perform a very specific task to add two numbers. So when we call this function, and that will be the first, so we need to forward two numbers exactly in same order right here. The first number will go to the first parameter, second number will go to second parameter. So that's mean the first argument will be received by the first parameter, the second argument will be received by the second parameter. Let's assume we have 15, the first number, and the second is 16. The result will be 31, right? So we pass this value, the first value will be received. So these are placeholder. 15 will be received by first number and 16 will be received by second number, and then we declare a variable result that will add these two numbers, and it has a result of these two numbers, and then we just simply cout the result. So this is the call we have with add two number is the name of the method, and we forward the first number separately with comma because we have a comma here, and then second number end with semicolon. All right, if I run, there will be errors, you see. So it's saying that non-void function does not return a value. Okay, so that's mean if you use a data type, then you need to return something. Okay, so at this point we cannot use cout, but if you want to use cout here, then that will be a void data type. Okay, now it will add two numbers, so we got 31. But if you use int data type or float data type, you have to return something, and that will be return here. Now it will return the result, that is 31. 31 will be here, and we got the result 31 from this function, but we doing nothing with that function. We're not displaying anything. You see, there is no output. All right, now we going to use a cout statement. That will be, you can use a cout statement here. Okay, so that will now print out the result. You got this 31 here, or you can have another variable here that will be, let's say, int result by func. Okay, and that will be here. You got the result, and now it will again display nothing because we assigned that 31 to this variable, and now we can again display this, that is result by func. That is a function, that is a 31. Now you will see it again display 31. Now you can also perform few other calculation with this method. Let's say I want to add another let's say 31. Now it will be 62 to this result that is received by this function. Okay, so that will be 62 now because I perform more functionality, because I got result back from this function. Okay, but in case of if you just simply print out, let me print out again, that is a void without any return type. Now there will be an error because we forward these two numbers. You see, now even error here, you cannot assign to this value because that function is not returning anything. Okay, that's the first error we have. So let's assume we simply call it, then it won't be possible. So you see, we just print out 31, but let's say I need to add 2 to this result. Now there will be an error. Okay, so you cannot do that. But before, if you get a result back from function, then you can perform this functionality. I think now it's clear to you what is return and why we use void. All right, so now let's look at few more functionalities where we return. I'm going to use return here, and then int result by func, the same variable here, and then cout result by func. All right, now So that you can also use, you see I use another variable here, that is to store the result. You can simply use return statement here, okay, and then you don't need this line. The same thing, we first store the result to the variable and then we return result back to the function. But here we are saying add the two numbers and return result back to the function, and everything will be again same. You will get 31 again here. So that's just the same in few lines if in case. All right, so that's the function we have written. So you can also do multiplication. So we have int a and b, so that function is now doing multiplication, and we have this number first is the second number we have, and then the result. All right, and another thing important here, so you can also take these values from user as well. Let me show you. You see I hard coded these value 15 and 16, but you can also have int a comma b. Let's say both variables are of int cout, and enter number 1. All right, and that will be cin a, and then again a message cout, enter number 2, and that will be cin b, and be forward now variables, that will be a and b to the function. Now it asks enter number first, that will be 15, and the second, we just need to separate these messages, and that will be, let's say second number is 13, 15, 30, now it will be 28, right? So you can also take these values from user as well. All right, now another, so these are, so that's the difference that I just explained, that if you use cout, right, then it will, the data type will be void and it will not return anything. So just printing something inside the function body, and you cannot perform more functionality on it or another calculation on the result. So that will just print out. All right, so another thing important is that you use data types for the parameters, right? For the parameters means these are parameters that are the placeholder that receive value. So use data types here. You don't need data type here to pass, right? So you simply pass the variables that we have because we have the declaration above. All right, and that's also you need to consider. And another important thing in function is the scope of the variables. Okay, that's a very important concept, that the scope of the variables, and the parameters and variables exist inside their own function. Okay, so these parameters and variable, their scope is limited to that function. Okay, so in case of this example, inside this main area, there is no such greet message. You see, this is the greet message we have. There is no such thing here inside the main area. So that's the scope of this variable is limited from this curly bracket to this curly bracket. That is called local to the function. Okay, so these variables are local to the function. Then there is another concept that is called global variable, that is not part of this this lecture, but there are also global variables that we have that you can access anywhere inside function or inside your program. But these inside here, these variables are local to function. Their scope is limited here, from here to here. And inside greet, okay, there is no such thing that is argument. So inside this, in this side body, in this message that is greet from this curly bracket to this curly bracket, there is no such thing argument. That's another variable that we have, because we pass this value that is received by this variable. So there is no such thing argument here. If you try to call it, then there is a local scope error that will be generated by compiler. Okay, so these variables are local to the functions. So another, so now we have just seen functions with the return and void. Okay, so that's another example that we have here. And then without return we use void. That's these things I just discussed. Okay, now we have functions with default parameters. Okay, functions with default parameters, because we pass these values to function that we receive from user. Okay, but let's say if I do not receive from values from this user, and I pass 15, and if I pass 17 here, okay, what will happen? So that will be 15 into 17, the result will be 32, right? Then we also have concept of default values. Let's say we have the default value is 1 for this parameter, and the default value of this parameter is 9. Okay, so what will be result in this case? The result will be same 32. So it doesn't mean that if you forward a value greater than the default value, then it's override. No, whenever you forward this value, it will override the values. Okay, even if it is smaller, it's greater, it doesn't matter anything. Let's say if we pass, we do not pass anything, let's assume, but we have default values there, that is 1 and 9. The result will be 10. Okay, so we got 10. So function now use default values that we have here. Okay, and let's say if I pass just 12 and I do not pass the second value, that is 12 will be received by first number, and we do not have the second value, that is 12 by 9, and that will become 19. Oh sorry, 21. 12 by 9 is 21. You see, it just used this default value and it added these two values. And let's say if I pass 8, and you must be thinking this is smaller value compared to this one. No, but when you pass the value, it's override the value. So now it will be 12 by 8, that will be 20. Okay, so we got 20. So these are the default values. You can also assign default values if in case if you do not pass values to the function. All right, so that's the concept of default value. And then there is an advanced concept that you will study in object-oriented programming, that is about function overloading. And there is overloading, overriding, and then there is also encapsulation and polymorphism. There's a lot of things that you study in programming too, or programming in or in object-oriented programming, that you see these all. So this is not a part of example for programming 1. So we have function void print info, and that takes age. Okay, and then we have print info. You see both function names are same, age and name, but their parameters are different. So this, in this case, the int is inside data type of int, and this is the data type of string. So this concept is called function overloading. Same name, we have same name with different data types of parameters. So the same name will perform, same function will perform different functionalities. All right, so there are a lot of things that you will study in object-oriented programming. So at this point, just to give you some understanding of function overloading, right? So the same name with different data types. All right, so now we have seen almost all these examples in this in the class for all our previous chapter that we discussed, that is conditionals and loops. All right, so you and what else, the different variables, arithmetic. So we have seen all these stuff in the class. So you just need to convert these tasks into functions, because function performs specific tasks and it provides also reusability, right? So we have a lot of tasks that you need to do in the class.